Hey Mad Minions, welcome to another episode of Writing Game Books. Today, we're going to be talking about branching narratives, how to make map choices for game books. In previous episodes, we talked about what essentially a game book is, so let's start getting down to the nitty-gritty on how to make them. So grab your pen and paper or Microsoft Word or whatever you got, and let's go. If you're new here, this channel is about, this segment of the channel, I should say, is all about creating game books. Those awesome choose your own adventure, that phrase is copyrighted, style stories. In this video, we're going to talk about structuring game books' branching paths, creating a flowchart to track decisions, and to make sure every choice feels interesting. Plus, I'll share some tips on how to avoid frustrating dead ends. Because believe you me, in The Danger of Blackwood Moors, the one I'm working on, it is probably going to be over 1,000 entries. So there are a lot of dead ends. So you will need to map out as much as you can. So let's talk about what actually a branching narrative is. Blah. In a game book, the story doesn't move in a straight line. It splits into different paths based on readers' choices. Think of it like a tree. Each decision is a branch that leads to a new outcome. Done right, this makes your game book replayable and immersive, because readers can explore different routes and get totally different endings. First, you want to start with a core decision. To design your core branches, start with a core decision. Something big that sets the tone for the story. Let's say your game book is a fantasy adventure. You might begin with the reader finding a mysterious sword in a cave. Do they pick it up or leave it behind? There's your first branch. It's that easy. And from there, each choice should lead to new possibilities, like facing a curse if they take it, or missing a hidden power if they don't. It's all up to you. For example, it could say something like, you find a glowing sword. Do you pick it up? Go to section 5. Or do you leave it? Go to section 121. Okay, next, you want to create a flowchart to map your choices. Now, here's where things get fun and, most importantly, organized. To keep track of all these paths, you will need a flowchart. A flowchart is just a visual map of your story's branches, showing how each choice connects to the next. So let's break it down. Start with your first decision, then draw lines to the outcomes. For each outcome, add new choices and keep going. This helps you see the bigger picture and make sure you're not missing any paths. There are programs that I mentioned before, like Artistry Draft 3 and Twine and all these others, which we'll be getting into in future episodes. But these will do a lot of they'll do a lot of the flowcharts for you, which is incredibly helpful. I do a lot of them just for the size of this book. I've done a lot of them by hand, and in a future episode, I'll show. Maybe next time, I'll start showing some of them. I don't want to show too much because it'll give spoilers for the book, but I think they'll be interesting. I think people will find them interesting. Okay, as I mentioned, the last two shows I've done on this, you need to make the choices interesting. If the reader picks an option, it doesn't necessarily have to change the story. There are big choices, like I said, if you pick up the sword. But let's say you were just searching. Let's say you find a dresser, and you open it up in an old haunted house. You open it up, and there's an old sweatshirt. The sweatshirt might be nothing. It just might be an abandoned sweatshirt by the haunted house's previous occupants. but it should still be an interesting choice. It's obviously not a meaningful choice. It's not a groundbreaking, earth-shattering choice, but it should still be at least an interesting encounter. You pick up the sweatshirt, you put it on, does it do anything besides keep you warm? Is it filled with moths? Is it filled with mold? So you could even you could make it a little bit more out there by maybe it's a cursed sweatshirt or something, I don't know. But you should at least try to give a little bit of care to that entry. The sweatshirt crumbles in your hands because it's been here for obvious years. As you pick it up, clouds of dust flake off of it. Stuff like that will make it interesting. Going back to the sword analogy, if you take the sword and get cursed, maybe they start hearing voices that lead you to a new quest. If they leave it, they might avoid the curse but miss out on whatever the voices tell you to. The key is make it interesting. Interesting. Every little encounter, every little choice needs to be interesting, because if you make stuff that's not that interesting, even if it's just a boring encounter like finding an old sweatshirt, players will find other stuff, players or readers, depending on how you want to look at it, will find other stuff to do with their time. And you don't want that. You want them to read your book. So make them interesting. Let's see. Another good trick to use for stuff like this is a delayed consequence. So maybe as you pick up the old sweatshirt and shake off the mold, maybe the mold is poisonous. Maybe you're poisoned. Maybe you have fungus growing in your lungs now from the mold, but it won't kick in until maybe 20 sections later. So that's another fun way. So you can actually make a mundane entry that doesn't look very interesting actually more interesting down the line. And it also keeps players on their toes. So if you keep those stakes high, it makes every decision feel that much more like it is interesting. Okay. Another thing, this is more of an old school game book. I know a lot of newer ones don't do this. But I know it really annoys some readers. Dead ends. A choice where it comes to an abrupt, you die, game over, with no warning. This is notorious in fighting fantasy books. And to me, that risk is fun, but it needs a little bit of role. It needs a little bit of meaning. I talked about this before. Is if you have a path where you're in an old corridor, and to the left, there's maybe a small puddle on the floor, and the cobblestone is starting to crack in places, and even collapse in an area. To the left and to the right, most of that cobblestone is completely worn away. It is dark. You get a stench, a horrible miasma from down that corridor, a stench of death, and a few skulls and bones litter the corridor. So obviously, and maybe there's a dragon at the end of the right one. Well, then you at least had a little warning. You have to give players a little warning. Nobody likes, obviously, if a bad roll ends you, because obviously, if a dragon breathes fire on you and you roll poorly, well, that's the dice that killed you. Maybe, dun dun dun, but you know what I mean. Just nobody likes an insta kill. You should at least have some kind of warning. As somebody who writes game books, especially ones that are really fresh, the dungeon isn't too bad, but out in the wilderness, where like you can pretty much go like any direction, you kind of need like some way to keep players in an area. So if they say like, oh, well, I'm just gonna hop on a boat, and if there's like the adventures in a town, and the player's like, well, I'm gonna hop on a boat and sail across the other side of the world. Well, you might have to do something to hem them in to the area you need to. But you always want to give the reader a fighting chance. If a path is dangerous, foreshadow it, like I mentioned. Like, have some skulls or objects or death, or like maybe the cave floor looks unstable before you step forward. Is also like another hint for a trap. But instead of a straight game over, give them a chance to escape. Like I'm writing right now where you're being chased through this building, and I was originally going to have there was like one correct way. You could go this way, or this way, and two of the ways were going to lead to instant death, and you get caught by the angry mob that's chasing you. But instead, what I'm going to do is, do you hide in a dumb spot? So obviously, if you're being chased by 36 evil cultists, and you basically hide in a trunk in the middle of a room, that's probably the first place they're going to look, so they'll find you. But so there's at least give like multiple options to escape. I mean, most of them will still kind of lead to death if you choose kind of dumbly, but there's still ways you can get out of it, if that makes sense. Yeah, the goal is I want to challenge my readers, but I do not want to punish them. Okay, and so this is how I design branching narratives for my game books. To recap a little bit, I start with my core decisions. Do you go into the building, or do you walk down the path? There's something horrible coming. You hear like a big, loud thumping, big, huge, bulky creature, and you are not Conan. You were just like a little schlub. So do you stand there? Do you like face off against the monster, or do you run do you run? Do you hide? Do you look for something like do you have an atomic bomb in your backpack? There's a whole bunch of like branching things you can do. So, but that's like your core decision. Then you map out your choices using a flow chart. I use like paper mostly, or right now I'm using GBAT, which is the Gamebook authoring tool, it was nice, but this is probably my last book I'm going to be doing with it because the guy has not updated it in forever. I've heard of things called like Lucid Chart or Miro that a lot of people use, but I have not used them myself. But I will give them a look-see, and actually I will I will review those in future episodes. You want to make every choice interesting. Not all of them need to have like super life-changing consequences, but they should make the encounter interesting enough that the player wants to explore. Avoid frustrating dead ends. All this stuff will take practice, but once you get the hang of it, it becomes like second nature to you. And like I said, in that chase through the building that I mentioned, I saw like all like the dead ends and like the automatic like deaths, and I was like, that's not really fair. So we're gonna change those. And I did that without even like thinking about it, because I was just thinking like, is this fun? No, that's not fun. So we're gonna change it. But once you get the hang of it, you'll be crafting stories that like readers won't be able to put down. For a cheap plug right here, if you go on Amazon and search for Castle of Blackwood Moors, you can see that the book gets pretty good ratings. So hopefully I know what I'm talking about. And feel free to pick up a copy. Feel free to pick up a copy for your dog, or your mailman, or your mailman's dog. But are you ready to start mapping your own game book? Grab the tool of your choice and get branching. Hopefully you found this helpful. There's going to be more gamebook creation tips in the future, and just writing tips in general. I also write novels, so I would like to talk about those more. But if you got a good idea for a branching story, drop it in the comments. I would love to hear about what you are writing about. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next adventure.